Hi everybody, good morning. Sorry to be having this in the wrong way, but if I turn the phone sideways, I look way too fat. So, I have a hard time sleeping, and I have a hard time waking up, being human, and listening to the anti-Chinese propaganda, which is more and more and more and more and more till it completely permeates the American media landscape. And I just thought that I should say something about it because I realize that there's not a lot of foreigners that have lived in China a long time like me. And the scope of the common American knowledge about China is really limited. And I could probably make a whole bunch of videos about that. Even about Americans' understanding of America's own history is pretty limited, and I'm sure people are going to attack me on that, and I'll be happy to talk about things from lots of things, from St. Augustine, Florida, to the original people that settled in forts, to the Lutheran Reformation, to Irish in the 16 that died in Ireland, and blah 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 blah. So much history. I love talking about it, but I'm not going to talk about that. I just want to talk about the anti-Chinese propaganda which is going on. And really, it's a tough video because I just want to make this real short. But in order to understand a lot of people's feelings, they didn't just get built up today and this decade and even this century. They go back a long time, and it's easy to keep the wheel of propaganda going. I mean, look at the picture of Promontory Point where the Transcontinental Railroad met, and you know that famous picture where the two railroads, or the east and the west, are coming apart, and all those people in the picture. Did you ever notice there's not a single Chinese person in that picture? And the Chinese government doesn't pay me. I'm going to flat out tell you right now, I am not a communist, socialist, any kind of what you're thinking about. I'm not your left wing or your right wing person. I'm a citizen of the world. And I didn't just live in China, I lived in Eastern Germany for some years, and many years, and yeah, and I carry guns, and that doesn't mean I'm racist. I don't like to shoot people. I never imagine wanting to shoot anybody. I like throwing knives and hanging out with my kids and looking for gold. I'm pretty much not your. A lot of people mistake me as being super conservative here in America, and I don't like these labels. And America's whole idea about the world, I know, is understandably limited. And I don't mean to paint with a broad brush, but in other videos, I'll talk about things that I know from being outside of America versus my knowledge of growing up in America, from growing up in the US, and versus the limited conversations I could have with people as an everyday American living here, and knowing what I can't even talk about because nobody knows, and there's a whole world out there. When I was in China, I used to do this as a teacher. I used to use this activity as an example of how much Chinese students didn't know about the world. Sometimes I'd ask them, raise your hand if you think China's bigger than Africa, or China's the same as Africa, same size geographically, and most people, like 90% said China's bigger or the same, and then I'd show them. And I'd even do this in America. I do this to random people driving rideshare, and I say, hey, you know, which is bigger? And actually, if you look at a map, you could actually fit like the United States, China, Canada, like Europe, or India. You could fit them within the the geographical outline of Africa. Africa's huge, and I was just using that as a point to like. There's a lot that people don't that they take for granted. There's just a little activity I did, but anyways, listen. I really want to go into the great depth of misinformation and how ludicrous it is. In China, whenever a person would come from America, there's a slang word that they would call like people born in America that go to China. They would call them bananas. And that was kind of racist, right? Like white on or yellow on the outside, but white on the inside, right? And my wife says, "Oh, I'm an egg, like white on the outside and yellow on the inside," and it's kind of it sounds mean and derogatory. It's kind of funny. It is, but at the same time, the whole idea about colors of skin and ethnicities is way different than what just solely exists here in America. I remember once I was took a long trip in Eastern Germany. This was after the wall came down, and there weren't that many McDonald's, and I'm not a celebrator of McDonald's like any time, but we happened to be at a McDonald's in one of the rare locations that had a McDonald's in East Germany after the wall came down, and I was sitting there, and there was a lady doing a driver's lesson. In Germany, when you get your driver's license, you have to go on a lot of classes with your driver, and there was this driver instructor and the driver that was sitting at McDonald's, and one had a kid or something, and there's a black man at McDonald's, and there wasn't that many black people were in these villages where I lived in Germany at all. They're not like a lot of people grew up and they've never seen a black person their whole life, right? And so this little kid, I always remember, and it's really representative of what I see in a lot of humanity. This little kid, this little girl, I think it was like probably like 6 or 7, saw her first time. Oh, and she said, "Oh, can I touch you?" And it wasn't racist at all. It was just a curious child, and that kind of trait follows humans in different cultures, and it doesn't matter all ages, and it's not always a racist thing at all, right? So there's different kinds of cultural differences that I know that you probably can't even imagine if you've never experienced them. And I'd love to speak about Hong Kong as part of the whole anti-China campaign. And I probably say that for a different video. I'm going to tell you just really quick in a real quick summary. If you've ever been to the Bay Area in California, where the ultra rich are living, Hong Kong is like a million times richer than the Bay Area. And if you've ever gone to Dubai or you ever gone to the richest section of New York, imagine you went around the world and you collected the ultra super 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 rich, richer than all the greatest gentrification, and you put them in a really tiny area, which is Hong Kong. And you'd have, actually on the streets, you have Bentleys and Bentley and Lamborghini, and everybody's got such a nice car that they aren't that nice car anymore. They're kind of miserable in little McDonald's, and all the slaves, like if you know anything about how there's slave labor in Dubai, like how the servants are treated and how the servants are treated, well, pretty much you see the sidewalks in Hong Kong full of servants from poor developing countries that are there sleeping on the sidewalks because they have some kind of slavery. Um, and you could think of Hong Kong as like all those offshore places where you hear them laundering money and these big Cayman Island accounts. Well, that's kind of what Hong Kong is, and it's like the nationalism of Hong Kong is ultra rich, and I'll talk. That's not really. I don't have that much expertise of Hong Kong, but I know a little bit about it, and it's not being put into slavery. And you know what? I'm not even going to talk about how imperialism conquered Hong Kong and how Teddy Roosevelt's grandfather was one of the biggest opium dealers. And yeah, so much irony in the history and the using Hong Kong as a leverage anti-China propaganda. It's pretty bad, but I'm not going to talk about that, okay? Because it requires a lot of in-depth historical, you need to have a basis of knowledge before you even have that conversation. So it's easy to make blatant statements about what's happening or what happened to people that don't have the preliminary courses, right? So anyways, I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk specifically about using the Uyghurs, and I'm not going to talk about Chinese military. I'm not talking about, I should make a ton of videos, but I'm not. I'm just going to talk about the Uyghurs right now, okay? And the death camps for Uyghurs. And most of you don't even know what a Uyghur is. You don't know where Xinjiang is, and it's the north part of China. Most people don't know about the 51 different ethnicities officially that make up China, and the different languages and the autonomous zones. And unlike a CNN you will listen to CNN, listen to the news, it's like a cheap B movie, like a B movie actor. Unlike the CNN news reporter, I know China. I lived there about 18 years, right? Like, somebody lives in America, 3 years could be American. I don't have a Chinese citizenship. I consider myself a citizen of the world. I have China in my heart, like Germany was in my heart, and like America. I really, if you want to know my personal belief, I wish the world had no passports. I wish we had open borders. I think it's beautiful, different cultures, and really beyond each culture and beyond each different language, you'll find out that good people are good people, and we're not that different as we appear. And but I'm not going to talk about my own general beliefs like that. I'm going to talk about just really quick what's going on with the anti-China Uyghur propaganda. Okay, look, and also, you know what? Whenever I have so many people come up to me, oh yeah, when they hear me speak Chinese on my wife, on the phone of my wife, and they're extending arms. Oh yeah, there's a YouTube guy that goes around and he speaks Chinese, and you know what? That's pretty much a good example of the scope of what people's knowledge is they talk about this guy who speaks Chinese on YouTube, and that's what they know about. Look, you know what? I hate to break your bubble, but there's like, what, a quarter of the world's population speaks Chinese, and one white guy speaks Chinese on YouTube is famous. There's a lot of people with a lot of different color skin that can speak Chinese. Can you imagine if you had a guy on YouTube that ran around to Taco Bell's speaking Spanish and say, oh my god, he can speak Spanish? My hero is so I can't tell you how stupid I think it is when people say, hey, you should make a YouTube channel and speak Chinese. Oh, but that's another topic. Okay. Now listen. China has a huge, its geographic landmass is about the same size as America. They have, why there's not a lot of Americans there, there's a lot of different ethnic groups there. And the Uyghur people, when you see them, they could look like a Caucasian person. They're Caucasian ancestry, like Turkish, blonde hair, they got blue eyes, and they speak Turkish, and they speak their own language. They don't look like ethnic Hans, okay? But it's part of China. Now, China's intermigration is controlled, was controlled, and that's changing so much on something called a hukou, or a family book. And that means when you were born somewhere, you kind of have like a regional identification for the area that you're born in. If you were born in one area, you get access to the public rights and the public funds from that area where you were born, where your family book is, called hukou. And this was done to control the population density of cities. And my wife's making jokes in there. So, anyways, they control the population density of different cities through the hukou, through intermigration. And during the 70s and during the 80s and during the 90s, and even during the early 2000s, it's very different than it is today. Okay, China's developed from the time I was there, from 2000 to 2017. It's probably the equivalent of American developed from the 1950s to 1990s. It's huge leaps in development. People did move around a lot more, and they didn't follow the old hukou system. In fact, it's popular conversation to get rid of the hukou system in China. Now, that being said, because of the hukou system, Uyghurs and other ethnic groups, they didn't have a history of going to different parts of China, just like the Zhangzhou and other people didn't go up to the north so much. So it's relatively new that people in China would see Uyghurs, and they, wow, look at these foreigners, and because of the same kind of curiosity, what I mentioned from that little girl in the Eastern restaurant singer seeing black man, there's a lot of feelings about that, a lot of that kind of initial reaction for Chinese people when they see an American the first time, or whatever. And in China, a lot of Americans go there, and foreigners, they go there and they live in these expat enclaves. Like, how we have Chinatown in America. Well, we also have Chinese and Asians mixed up in general population, but there's some that want to stay in Chinatown. Well, you magnify that by like 1 million, and that's like what the expat community is. When foreigners go to China, it's very similar to the tradition when they went there and they were selling opium, and they had their little enclaves and their little forts and their little imperialistic communities. I did not live in expat communities. I was living in local population for the entirety of my 18 years in China. I feel like China was my hometown, pretty much. I did not have any foreign neighbors, and I didn't just go there for a year or two and hang out with other foreigners. And 90% of expats in China, they're going out to the special expat bars and getting drunk every night. It's a big party, like spring break in America. And just a side note, it always kind of makes me feel kind of sad when I hear about teachers, and that's a way of travel. A lot of foreigners think, go teach English, go party, and see things. And for me, even when I lived in Eastern Germany in this mountain village for years, I only saw one couple from the West. They were English teachers. I didn't even know that was a thing, that foreigners taught English, and I didn't know about that. And And when I was teaching in China, it was like a profession for me. Like, I care about teaching. I absolutely had no idea that, like, oh, I'm traveling the world as a ESL teacher. And when I saw the Americans come and go in their little party thing and not really care about teaching, I was never in that group, and I always felt embarrassed. And I felt more like a Chinese teacher watching these teachers come in and go than part of this group that I'm going to teach English and use that as a way to travel. Um, it was not even the same level for me. And in fact, as the foreigners came and gone, to me they look like foreigners. And I just that's people could do whatever they want. But just to give you a little bit of a background of my existence in China, I I guess you could say that I just like all the other everyday Chinese people. If you pick somebody that immigrated to America for 18 years and they lived and work every day versus somebody that's taking a vacation from London or something, I don't know if that gives you the same kind of perspective. But anyways, from that perspective, I can tell you that I didn't even see that many Xinjiang people in Guangxi where I lived. Where I lived in Guangdong, I saw more and more, and even for Chinese people, they'll still have checks and on the streets or subway. Will they randomly check your ID to see where you're from? See if you actually have to have work permits and have residence living permits to come from different provinces to work in different cities, and that's the laws. That's a regulation. They don't do it to discriminate against Uyghur people, and they do that to control their distribution of resources. You got to remember they've got 18% of the world's population. Okay. Now I don't want to really talk about that, but just a little bit of a background. Now the Uyghurs that I've seen, and the Xinjiang people, what I've seen, that they had a hard time, just like anybody would have a hard time. They would be street vendors. They would sell traditional Xinjiang food, like Xinjiang. They have this traditional shish kebab barbecue or different types of flatbread. In fact, um, I love Xinjiang food. I love their bread. I would get a lot of bread for my kids from Xinjiang bakeries and from vendors on the street. Sometimes I'd buy 20 or 30 of them, bring them home, and that was our loaf of bread, was from people from the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Now, hey guys, please hold on a sec, guys. So sorry, my kids are here. So they did have other jobs than street vendors, but being they were from such a far off area, like you're in Rhode Island, they're from Rhode Island, and you're living in Southern California. That's the distance of, it's big, just like America's big. So they're when people see them, they say, "Oh wow, it's a foreigner. Oh, it's a Uyghur," and they have a little bit of an aura of difference there. Now, is there racism in China? Is there discrimination in China? Sure, just like that problem exists in every country I've been to. Okay, take a look around. Is it to the extent like the KKK in America, like hanging and burning and shooting people because they're different? No, it's nothing like that. Okay, the racism kind of history in America is particularly to. Is there a history of some racism? Sure, it's an ugly face all around the world. Okay, now that being said, are Uyghurs being put into slave labor in factories like Nike? Oh my God, are you serious? Look, the propaganda is getting so over the top. Look, I didn't just teach English. I was also a vocational English trainer. I taught for many Fortune 500 companies in China, and I taught to help the local teams communicate with the foreign managers. I taught for HSBC, P&G, Nokia, Nortel, Schneider Electric, Bristol Myers Squibb, VLC Corporation, Fisherman Tobin. I could go on and on and on and on of the Fortune 500 companies, and I did go to factories. And you know what? A lot of you guys don't realize that a lot of China's developed so much that the cost of production has increased to such a high extent that corporations can't really exploit China like they used to. And a lot of the shoemaking factories, they went to Vietnam and Philippines, where the production is cheaper. And you guys have no idea. And I can't, I got to make some videos because I could see that like there's nobody that knows anything that much about China living in America. But anyways, so in perspective, I came to America. I worked in Tesla for a year. Because of my NDA, I can't tell you about everything about Tesla. I can tell you that the factory in Tesla was worse than a lot of factories I've seen in China. That those cute little videos of robots that they always use for promotion, well, I have to be careful. On the first floor, that's not how it is on the second and third floor. And there's a lot of manual labor. And wow. Like, you don't have, there's not slave labor in the factories in China, but it's not like people with face tattoos, drunk, having kids with the production associates in the parking lot and like just bring their own music and party and go home, or like lazy slacking. Wow. I mean, America, the factory, from my factory experience in America compared to what I've seen, it's like some rich kid's house party while their parents are away, compared to like hardworking people just trying to do their job and take care of their family. That's a pretty broad generalization, and I don't want to be specific because I don't want to violate my NDA. So, anyways, that being said, the factory, like I taught Colgate Palmolive and stuff. When you have a factory in China, you used to have like it used to be required that you had half our partnership with the Chinese company. And being a big company like Nike, or any other companies, they have a lot of random investigations that are done from special investigation teams. Sure, in the 90s in China, in the 80s, and other third world countries at that time, China I don't consider a third world country at all anymore, but there used to be extortion of labor, and their foreign companies would make their products cheap, and that was not acceptable anymore. Now a lot of foreign companies have different regulations, and they're self-regulated, and I can't give you the specific names of the regulation groups right now, but basically you have teams, even from their own corporate offices, that go through and do periodic inspection. And they don't just inspect the factory where the products are produced, they inspect the suppliers of those factories to make sure that these factories are following common human rights laws. And there's a ton of people working in there, and there's a higher unemployment in China right now. There's no way that there's a lot of reasons why child and forced labor from Uyghurs is not happening in China. Look, number one, people in China would be pissed off because they want to have jobs. There's no way they'd allow that unfair happening. Like, the Chinese would shut down the factory in a second, the workers would, because that wouldn't be fair. They couldn't get their job. Number two, there's inspectors everywhere. Are you kidding me? And if this was happening, there's nothing that some workers would love to do but to take videos of that and say, look at this terrible American company taking advantage of China with child labor. There's no way you could keep that a secret. Okay, number three, like Nike and stuff is like people compete to work there. It's like working in Microsoft. If there was going to be child labor, it would be some no-name shoe company that was not underneath the microscope. Okay, I mean, come on. It'd be like, can you imagine, like, if Coca-Cola or somebody that was big in the limelight, if that got exposed, that was happening. And number four, I don't know what you think that there's control. I mean, people could use YouTube and Facebook. Like I said, you can't keep it in the secret, and it's just super crazy far out there that you could even say something like that. Now, for people in America who've got this image of 12-year-olds all over China working till their fingers bleed, you guys are so wrong. You know, the education system in China, kids are study so hard, and they're very valued in the society. And I feel sorry that education is not so valued in America right now. And is education perfect in any country? No, it's not. But wow, the way that the children are neglected in America does appear to be like a third world country to me, at least from the perspective where I'm living. Um, Now, the sad thing is, when I'm seeing this, you say, well, what about we hear this news and we hear this? Well, think about it, everybody. Where are you getting your news from? And isn't it funny you hear like left wing and right wing with the same kind of propaganda? Like CNN had an hour special last night about this guy that went to Italy and he left his kids in China at his grandma's house, and he can't get the visa in Italy. And how can a country do that? Well, wait a second, man. America, Italy, they got immigration laws. This guy should have stayed there and got the visa worked out for his kids before he left them with his grandma. And to see this white guy, I don't know what color it is, I'm listening on radio, go to Xinjiang, who can't even speak Chinese, and find his grandma's house and say, hey, do you miss your dad? And all this, making this little kid cry. And I think, oh my God, this is like so cheap bullshit. Are you kidding me? And they're calling this a real story. Look, I came to America. I had to leave my kids and my wife in China for 6 months. It's not because China. It's immigration laws, man. You gotta be a man. You gotta deal with the laws, man. I mean, it's like America's building borders, talking about sending people away. Well, is America gonna let them all in without a visa? If they don't, are they racist, separating family? That's another topic. And America did split up families, but I'm not even talking about that. Look, but this guy, this whole thing was being played out. These shitty parents, they're putting this on China. Look, there's two sides to every story. Trust me. And when it's in some distant land and you hear a foreign language and you have this vision in your head, it's so easy to manipulate people. Now, does China have problems? Sure it does. Capital flight. There's, cities used to be able to get their funding from the central Beijing government by showing X amount of growth for their city every term, whatever. They have to show, well, our city grew this much, so we need this much more budget. So that would artificially stimulate real estate production. There's a big real estate bubble right now in China. Huge empty cities. Check out the videos where I rode to Hong Kong and stuff on my YouTube channel, maybe. But anyways, these corrupt people would flee the country after all these development, and they would go to Canada and America, and they'd live here, be sheltered, and they'd steal a lot of money, and it's a huge problem. Capital flight. In fact, the central government is trying to crack down on these thievery, on these corruption, and like if you look in America harbors a lot of this, and they support it. I mean, at one time the biggest yacht in the world is owned by this corrupt Chinese businessman that fled, and it's parked in New York Harbor. And I forget the Chinese guy's name, but this guy is so corrupt and he's so anti-China. He, it's unreal. The guy Steve Bannon or whatever his name is, that used to be the head of Breitbart, that was Trump's number one advocate or manager, he got arrested on the yacht in New York City. And what's not talked about commonly is this Chinese ex-corrupt businessman is paying him to make anti-Chinese propaganda, and he has all these anti-Chinese campaigns, which is convenient for the CIA and FBI. They don't crack down on him at all, even though he's stole millions and millions and millions and billions from China. But you could look this up. I'm not even going to tell you the details. Go look it up. What is his name? Steve Bannon? Go look up on who shipped this guy that's so anti-China. He actually originated the stories about the China flu. And I kid you not. You think I'm a conspiracy theorist?
Excuse me.
Go. Sorry about that. I had to pause the video. But look at the Chinese corrupt tycoon ship with Steve Bannon's on, and look at his origination of his distribution of his anti-China I even forgot the name of it for COVID-19. How do you forget that name? For his, the origination of his COVID-19 campaign. I mean, it's documented. But anyways, people like him and the Falun Gong, which was outlawed in China, and is that right that it was outlawed? Probably not. You know, it was a opposition political party, and it was a simple way to get rid of your opposition, just like they did with outlawing marijuana in the 1970s or whatever in America, when, you know, it wasn't always criminalized. And that's a debate. Is that right? Is that wrong? I could be right or could be wrong. But I could tell you that there are a ton of smear campaigns. And they, you know, what is a reason for an anti-China smear campaign about the Uyghurs? Is it from this rich guy that's got a vendetta against China, with sitting on he's one of the world's richest people, sitting in New York? Is it sure? Is that part of it? Sure. Is it the Falun Gong? Sure. Is it some of the corporations that are trying to make China weaker so they could change local policies? Sure. Did the Opium War happen as a way to force China to open up to trade? Sure it did. Does history repeat? Sure it does. Is China trying to take over the world with their military? Take a look at a geographic map of all the American bases in the world. Look at how many bases around China are American bases. Now take a look at the same map and look around America. How many bases are Chinese bases? Can you count the difference? You know, it's unfortunate that any country wastes money on the military. I'm against that completely. I think militaries are from a bygone era. We need to stop spending money on armies, spend money on education, and help people. You know, this whole idea, my opinion has always been about the Dawu Islands, and that is a distraction for the local Chinese people, because really there's a huge property bubble right now, and that's a whole other topic, and it's a great way to draw attention from the unemployed and the current crisis of the property bubble inside of China. It's a distraction. Is that a forward base that China's attacking the world? No, but it's great optics, you know, for distraction. Look, right now, I talked about the Uyghurs. America has a huge problem. After being gone for a long time, the amount of poverty I see in America compared to the development that's been done in China. It's like America's gone the opposite direction. The homelessness, the shortened school days, the amount of people with face tattoos, and the amount of people that are just drunk and getting high, and the party culture, and you drive through Las Vegas and see like the death of a bygone era, and really, I feel sorry. I'm not anti-American. I think America needs to develop, and they should look to China as an example of how a quarter of the world, almost a quarter of the world's population, came out of great poverty, and how they're doing well right now, and we should be working. America should be working with China and learning from China, and stop it with this old Cold War propaganda, and stop it with the military. Look, we don't need to be the superhero Americans and have a super evil villain in order to succeed. The whole logic of thinking needs to change. There are more American companies in China doing business every day that you have no idea. And the days of exploiting China are over. You can't do that no more. In fact, China even has changed a lot. Like, look at Tesla. They're not owned by a foreign company. China's stopped requiring full foreign partnership to open up companies. And you know what? Honestly, after what foreigners did to exploit China, and all those exploitations, when there were situations of destroying the economy and destroying the environment, these were mostly foreign companies that were doing that. They went to China to avoid the local laws and the labor rights that were fought for in America. They wanted to find loopholes, and when they couldn't find those loopholes in China, they're moving to Vietnam and other countries. This is unfortunately happening, and there's no coverage of it. So, America's infrastructure, America's automation, and in a lot of ways, it's behind so much what I saw in China. There's great things about America too. There's a lot of problems here, and you know what? The whole world is going through second industrial revolution, and the whole world has to localize production because of improvements in efficiency. It's no longer required to produce something in one part of the world and distribute it in another and make money on all the middlemen. So all those middlemen that were getting cut out of this old world system of distribution and production, there's a lot of pain being felt right now, and there's going to be a lot more pain. And it's easy to demonize another person instead of facing your own faults. And that's not a localized Chinese American issue. That's followed humanity through the ages. Okay. And I don't know. When people say, when I lived in America and they say, "Oh, tell me about your country," or when I lived in China and they asked me about it, he said, "Can you tell me about your country?" I said, "Well, first of all, I'm not a king. I don't have a country." And tell me, and I lived in China, and I'm not nationalistic. I don't fly any flag. I love my home, my neighbors, you could say I love China. I love China. I love America. I love people, and I love my students and my neighbors and my family in China, and my teachers and my colleagues, and a whole large part of my life through the everyday struggles that people go through, and you develop a bond. And I am not motivated by any form of government. I can tell you the Chinese government, not any government's perfect, but they miraculously, the logistics of having 1.4 billion people and feeding them, and can you imagine if there was a social unrest in China? And if you look in China's history, there was huge social unrest over the last thousands of years, which led to hundreds and thousands of people dying. And that's happened all around the world. But fortunately, that hasn't happened in a long time. And it was scary what happened during the Cultural Revolution in the 60s and 70s. That thing could have happened in a lot of countries. It happened in China. That's terrible, and it's came a long way. You know, imagine if that revolution happened here in America like that. Wow, would have been equally bad. Look what happened in Russia. That's in the past. It's not happening today. You know, I have taught at vocational schools in China. I know what it is when students can't pass the Gaokao and they get vocational training. It's no different than a trade school here or something. Um, you can't believe that I personally never been to Xinjiang. I believe that there are vocational schools being set up. I believe that there is an effort to try to stop the racism in against Xinjiang people in China. I believe there's an effort to, you know, to help equal development, and I'm sure they have a lot of vocational schools set up in Xinjiang. I do not believe they're separating families. I do not believe that they're imprisoning people. I do not believe that they're being forced slave labor. And I also question any of the media, the source of that media. Show me unbiased reports about China. You know, people say, why don't China open up? Well, I think China is not opening up its media because it's very clear the anti-Chinese campaigns that are going on. It's very easy to cut and splice film, and it's clear that no matter what anybody would go into China and see, like what I've lived there and seen, it's going to be twisted, misused, misrepresented, and misreported. I don't know of a single outlet that has given any non-biased look at Chinese people and their society. And it's not the first day. It's been happening for hundreds of years, right? So I completely agree with China's decision to not let foreign media run around and just make a fool and embarrass and continue to degrade the Chinese. I think America and everybody else owes China an apology, and I think that America should be great friends with China. And I'm sorry, there's a lot of things that I just quickly summarized and didn't go into depth about, but I hope that my voice does something to combat the nonstop propaganda I see. And for all the Chinese people out there, please don't hate Americans. I see the media here. It's every American here is surrounded by a nonstop image, by a video of China must be monsters, and that's all that they know. It's unbelievable. It's an endless cycle, and they're going to say, oh, of course, that's crazy, those evil Chinese. It's the same thing as if you hear about Americans being evil in China, and it's the propaganda here is like North Korea. It's so over the top. Will you imagine North Korea propaganda be so? I hope that everybody could get to know each other and stop this senseless propaganda. There's ulterior motives for sure. Okay, so I hate to be reporting from bed. I gotta go to work. I love everybody out there. I hope you're having a great day wherever you are. Talk to you later. Bye.